Hello and thanks for joining us here on France 24 for France in Focus. This edition comes to you from the Grand Mosque in Paris as we discuss Islam in France. It is, after all, the country's second religion after Christianity, and we've decided to discuss this in the month of Ramadan, something which is being observed by millions of Muslims across the globe. Well, in recent years, there's been no shortage of media coverage of Islam and its traditions here in France. Halal meat, headscarves, Friday prayers in the street, all generating plenty of debate. Well, let's start by taking a look at what it means to be Muslim in France in the year 2016, something which isn't without its challenges.
Nightfall is 2 hours away, and Aude is putting the finishing touches on the meal that will break her Ramadan fast.
I'm making a traditional Egyptian dish. It's called molokhia. He's the one who has to taste it.
Her husband Wahid is Egyptian. They met in the US a few years ago and moved to her native France in October. It's their first Ramadan together since Aude converted to Islam 9 months ago, a transition many of her friends and family found hard to understand.
Islam scares people these days because of all the controversies and all the generalizations that are made. I think there's also a huge lack of understanding. People talk about Islam even though they don't really know much about it.
That lack of understanding was crystallized for Aude during the brief period that she decided to wear a hijab or veil.
I really felt a physical aggression in people's tone. Why are you wearing that? What's on your head? Take it off. It's strange, but people seem to think that a woman who's confident in herself, in her body, in her faith, cannot make the choice to wear a hijab. And that's a real problem.
Fighting prejudice is a common theme among many French Muslims these days. 21-year-old Younes is an engineering student. Today, he's attending a conference on how to launch his own business. Born to a French mother and Algerian father, many people don't immediately recognize him as a Muslim, and he says he notices a shift in attitude.
Often when I meet people, it's cool at the beginning, but as soon as I say my name, there's a change. People say, Younes, is that right? It's always like that.
Countless other French Muslims have suffered the same stigma. An Arab name means Muslim, which must mean terrorist.
There is only one rule.
It's a sense of prejudice, tarring us all with the same brush. Even if you don't know anything about the person in front of you, I prefer to stay under the radar.
Mohamed Chirani feels a similar sense of discrimination and is taking his fight against radicalization to the spotlight. In the aftermath of the November 13th attacks in Paris, he appeared on TV channels including France 24 with an impassioned defense of his country and a plea not to turn against his Muslim community.
Like most of my fellow Muslims, I'm sick of the scum that is holding us hostage.
Mohammed believes the best way to fight back is with information.
What we call Islamophobia is ignorance. People see certain behavior or acts carried out in the name of religion, so they become scared of it.
Now he's turned his focus to the Islamic State group, publishing online videos that dissect its propaganda and make the distinction from the message of Islam.
One of the IS group's recent statements justifies the November 13th attacks on our religious spaces. They cited verses from the Quran, but I showed the verse and how they distorted it. And I explained that they have completely missed the point, that they don't understand it at all.
By stripping away the militants' claim to religion, he hopes to prevent more young Muslims from becoming radicalized. Mohamed, Younes, Aude, and many others believe that spreading tolerance and knowledge will help restore their faith's reputation in France and around the world.
Well, following on from recent tragedies here in France, the importance of interfaith dialogue cannot be underestimated. Well, one of the important voices in that dialogue is that of Dr. Dalil Boubacar, who is the rector of the Grand Mosque here in Paris. Thank you so much for speaking to France 24. Let me start by asking you, what do you view the role of the Grand Mosque as being?
The role of the Grand Mosque in Paris is a national, historic and central one. It's our aim to be part of life both in France and Europe. Indeed, everywhere there are Muslims, to teach an Islam of peace, an Islam of moderation, that we ourselves call a moderate Islam.
Of course, talking about moderate Islam and not extreme forms of Islam, why do you think there has been an increase in recent years of a more extreme interpretation?
Any religion can become a path to fanaticism, towards terrorism, any one of them. We don't want Islam to become a gateway to lead young people towards the Islamic State group and terrorism, towards the most atrocious and barbaric criminal acts.
Vers le terrorisme et vers la criminalité la plus atroce, la plus barbare. Donc,
we believe it has nothing to do with Islam, that the Islamic State group and their acolytes recruit among delinquents, among thugs, bandits and murderers, from among people who, basically, have only changed their focus, who are already violent and barbaric, who aren't people who practice Islam or even know the religion.
Right now, across the world, millions of Muslim people are observing Ramadan. Tell us a little bit about what Ramadan actually means. What does it symbolize for you?
Nous considérons que ce mois de Ramadan est
The month of Ramadan is the least we can do, to thank God through our own suffering, because after all we do suffer. It's hard to fast in the morning, from 3:30 a.m. to 10 in the evening, as we're currently doing. It's a month of forgiveness that allows us to conform to the tradition of our Prophet, who gave us the word of God.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Dalil Boubacar.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take you now to meet one French Muslim family as they live their day-to-day lives during the month of Ramadan.
Allahu Akbar.
It's 4:45 in the morning and Miriam and Rashid are at prayer. Half an hour ago, they'd been having breakfast. It's Islam's holy month of Ramadan, and they can neither eat nor drink during daylight hours.
You don't really want to eat breakfast so early. You have to force it a little. Because if you don't, you can't recharge your batteries during the day.
After that, Rashid heads off to work in construction. It's a heavy day, and he'll have to wait 17 hours before he can break his fast. Miriam, though, gets an extra 2 hours sleep before taking their 3 kids to school. For now, they're a little too young to fast with their parents. Miriam doesn't wear a headscarf. Both she and her husband are French-born and don't believe it necessary to show your religion to be among the faithful. At work, Rashid's getting a touch hot under the collar. The temperature's gone up to 31 degrees Celsius.
You sweat a lot and you can't hydrate, so that's the hardest, but this kind of physical work is my job.
Rashid stays with his colleagues for lunch as they tuck into ham sandwiches. For him, Ramadan is about tolerance.
Before being Muslim or not, we're all human beings, colleagues. We live our lives and we get on well. My spirituality and his are a private matter. As a Muslim, you have to be ready to adapt to anyone and anything.
Coming home is the best part of Rashid's day. It's time to get the evening meal ready with the kids, who take full advantage of their young age to grab a snack or two. Ramadan might be about taking stock of the year and how each believer can do better the next, but the evening meal isn't exclusively for Muslims. It's a moment to share between friends as well as family, who can also be invited in. It's 10 to 10, and with a traditional date and a glass of milk, the fast is broken.
Well, since the 1920s, the Grand Mosque has been here in the 5th arrondissement of Paris. And to find out more about the mosque, how it was built and what role it plays, we're joined now by Dr. Jalil Siddiqui, who is the director of the institute here at the Grand Mosque, which trains imams and chaplains. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Can I start by asking you, this mosque has been here since the 1920s. Tell us a little bit about how it came to be built here in Paris back in the 1920s.
That's a good question. The idea of the mosque is an old one that goes back centuries. But I think that it was the First World War that really pushed things forward, that pushed the French government into the decision to finance, to create this mosque, despite the law of 1905 on the separation between the church and the state. 90,000 Muslims died for France. It was the participation of Muslim soldiers from North Africa, from the nations of sub-Saharan Africa, which really pushed, little by little, the French government to build the mosque. It's the only one in Europe to have been built by law, as it was voted on by the National Assembly.
Apart from prayer, which happens in the prayer hall over here, tell us a little bit about the other activities that take place here at the Grand Mosque.
The mosque is part of a federation. It's not just a small place to pray. The Federation of the Mosque of Paris unites 500 mosques across France and Europe. It has religious training, training which is interpreted by the whole community. It's culture, dialogue between Christians, Jews and Muslims. It's a whole program of civilization. Even the beauty you see around you, like the mosaics, is also an expression of the Mosque of Paris.
And just lastly, could you tell me, is there a favorite place you have here at the Grand Mosque of Paris, somewhere you love to come every day?
This huge gateway, we call it the Gate of Peace. In the morning, the Imam opens it to pass from the ordinary world into the world of God. That passage interests me, and it's my favorite place.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of France in Focus. Thank you very much for watching and see you again soon here on France 24.